Okay, so let's talk about adding rational expressions. So, the rule for adding basic fractions is to keep the denominator add the numerator. So I would keep the 5 and add the numerator, which makes 5 over 5, which is equivalent to 1 when we simplify it. Let's do the same thing for our rational expression over here. If I were to keep the denominator, what is my the denominator? X plus 2. The quantity x plus 2. So I keep the denominator and I add the numerator. So I would add 7 and x squared. And I can't do anything else with that. That's it for that one. Okay, but what about when we're subtracting? So it's the same process. Keep the denominator. But this time I want to distribute the negative. Distribute the negative, then add the numerator. So let's do this one. So I would keep my denominator, have an equal sign right here. Keep my denominator of 7, distribute the negative to this 3, and I get 5 and negative 3. What is 5 and negative 3? 2 over 7. Let's do the same thing with our rational expression. I'm going to keep my denominator of 9x. I'm going to distribute the negative to everybody. So I would get 8, and what else? What else do I have here after I distribute that negative? No, I have a negative x and a negative 1. 8 and negative 1 makes 7, and I have a minus x. I can't simplify it any further than that because I have a negative sign. This is a quantity because it has a negative. We can't do anything else other than that. Questions? Okay, let's work on some. So write these 3 down. Okay, so let's start with number 1, x squared over 8 plus x over 8. They both have a common denominator of 8. So we're going to keep the denominator and add the numerator. So I have an x squared and an x. Can I do anything with that?
No.
Nope, that one's done. These also have a common denominator. So I'm going to keep the denominator of 5 and add the numerator. I have an x. I have a positive 3, I have another x, and I have a positive 2. Let's combine like terms. How many x's do I have? 2 x's plus 5 all over 5. Can I cancel those 5? No, because it's a quantity. I can't cancel those 5. Okay, good job, guys. This also has a common denominator of 2m minus 1. Once I have a common denominator, I can add the numerator. m plus 1 plus 3m minus 3. Let's combine like terms. How many m's do I have? 4m minus 2 all over 2m minus 1. Are we done?
No.
No. I can't divide yet, but I can. No, can't cross off the 2's. I can factor out a 2 from the numerator. What would I have left? 2m minus 1. Oh, look what happens when I do that. Now I have quantities that match. See how this is different than this?
I don't get why you say the quantity.
Because this whole thing right here matches, and I'm multiplying this whole thing by 2. So once it matches, I can now cancel the quantities out. And I'm just left with 2. Questions? Okay, moving on. This time we have a negative sign. So what was on our graphic organizer? What do we need to do with that? Distribute it. We're going to distribute that one. We're going to distribute this one. And this one. Give you a second to write those down. Okay, so I keep the same process. Keep the denominator. Add the numerator. I've got a 5x. Once I distribute that negative to that x, what does it become? Negative x. Let's combine like terms. What's 5x minus x? 4x over 8. Now I have straight multiplication. So isn't this 4 times x over 4 times 2? Cancel the 4's. Left with x over 2. Let's do this one. Sometimes. Okay, so I have an x, a positive 4. Once I distribute that negative, I have a negative x and a negative 2. How many x's do I have in all? 0. X and negative x makes 0x. 4 minus 2 makes 2 over 5. That's all we can do with that. Okay, let's do this one. Keep the same denominator. And in the numerator, I have a 5. When I distribute that negative, I have a negative 3x. What can we do with that? What can we do with this? But they're not the same. Well, I can't just multiply the top by a negative because then I have to multiply the bottom by a negative. But I can pull a negative out. Wouldn't this be the same thing? If I pull a negative 1 out, what does the 5 turn into? Negative 5. And what does the negative 3 turn into? Positive 3x. Now, the only thing different between them is the order. What property tells me that I can move those around? Commutative. So I could switch it around like this, right? 3x minus 5. Now I have quantities that match. I cancel, and my answer is negative 1. Question? What's different about these? The denominators are different, right? Well, can anybody come up with a strategy on how to make them the same? No. What? Well, but if I change them around, it'll be negative x plus 2. Does that match?
What we did?
What we just did. I'm going to pull out a negative 1 from each one of these and see what happens. So I'm going to rewrite it. 2x over x minus 2 minus, I'm going to keep my numerator like it is, and I'm going to pull a negative 1 out from that denominator right there. So when I pull out a negative 1 from 2, what do I get? Negative 2, and what does the negative x become? Positive x. Continue on. Can't I write a negative wherever I want on a fraction? Like for instance, if I had a negative 1/2, can't I write it like that or like this? So doesn't this negative, couldn't that negative go right there in front of it? Doesn't matter. So isn't a negative times a negative a positive? So now I have 2x over x minus 2 plus 2x over what? But would I write it negative 2 plus x? I wouldn't use the commutative property and just switch those. Now I have a common denominator, so I keep the denominator and add the numerator. What's 2x plus 2x? 4x, and we're done. Not sure if we want those signs in here. Okay. Yes, Armando. I put it right out in front, like this. I put it out front, and they become, it made a positive. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. All right, can we skip that step for this one? Can we do this one a little bit faster? Let's try. 5y over y minus 3. When I pull the negative out, it's going to be a negative times a negative. Doesn't that make a positive? Right? I'm going to pull a negative out of here. When I pull the negative out, isn't it going to make the negative y positive? And aren't I going to put it in front like that? And I'm going to pull a negative out of the 3, which is going to make it a negative 3. Everybody okay with that? The same process as this one. You want me to write the steps out? I can. 5y over y minus 3. I'm going to pull out the negative and switch at the same time. Can I do that at least? So when I pull out a negative from a negative y, it becomes positive y. And when I pull a negative out of 3, it becomes negative 3. Right, Vanessa? Yeah. You see it now? See how these are the same? If I were just distribute this negative, it would be a negative y plus 3, right? Yeah? Now a negative times a negative makes a positive, right? Mm-hmm. So now I have common denominators. Get it? So now I have y minus 3 is my denominator, and up top I have a 5y plus a 5y makes 10y. Okay? All right, this is your ticket out the door. Please write this down on your paper and solve that for me. When you're done solving it, come on up and I'll give you your homework for tonight.